Good evening, Ugandans, and welcome to tonight's UBC Behind the Headlines episode. With us in the studio are experts from different spheres and institutions working on data protection in Uganda. On Sunday, 27th November 2022, the Sunday Monitor ran a big headline: Government, NIRA, under fire over data breaches. The citizen out there might be wondering, how safe is their personal data that has been collected over 10 years of the data identification and issuance exercise by the National Institute in charge of registration of our data, NIRA. With me in the studio tonight is Honorable Rosemary Nyachkongoro, the chairperson of the Parliament Committee on Defense, and also woman member of Parliament for Shema. Honorable, you're welcome.
Thank you so much, and good evening, viewers.
Thank you. And next to Honorable is Counsel Kenneth Mhanji, who is an advocate and data protection expert. Kenneth, you're welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
And in the middle is the lady on the spot, the executive director of our National Identification and Registration Authority, NIRA, Madame Rosemary Kisembo. You're welcome to tonight's UBC Behind the Headlines.
Thank you very much, and good evening, viewers.
Thank you. And next is Advocate Mike Awoneka, who is a private advocate as well as a human rights activist with the civil society. Mike, you're welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sarah, and good evening, all our viewers.
And nearer to me is Madame Evelyn Namara, who is the founder and CEO of Vouch Digital. You're welcome.
Thank you, and good evening, viewers.
Thank you, our guests. So tonight we shall be assessing the data mechanisms, data control, data protection, integrity of data, as well as security and backup. What are these acquisition, storage, dissemination, coordination, and disposal mechanisms? Do we have a well-entrenched system in place? Are citizens' data safe? Is safety guaranteed by only national institutions, or we all have an obligation to pay? And how far has NIRA conformed and other sister agencies conformed to the National Protection and Privacy Act of 2019? And to take us through this is Honorable Rosemary Nyachkongoro. The story broke from your committee as you were interfacing with the experts. What is the status of our national data in this country?
Thank you so much, Sarah, for this kind of interaction. And as you've rightly said, the committee was interacting with some of the experts that were responsible for, that were contracted for, first of all, printing, training, bringing the equipment, to enable NIRA produce the identity cards that we have. And during the interaction, definitely one of the issues that came out was that, you know what, in Uganda, we don't have a backup system for our national information, particularly with regard to our identity cards. And this data has been collected over 10 years. And of course, as a committee, we picked interest, except that UBC picked more interest than the committee, because we were yet to meet with the concerned responsible people. And definitely the story was out. And definitely it was out because we had the media anyway in the meeting. Yes, as a committee, we picked interest because as a country, first of all, looking at our roles as members of parliament, we legislate, we appropriate, we also represent, we do the role of representation. And what came out was that you know, we cannot appropriate the amount of money that we have injected in this project as a country, and then we don't have a backup system that can really store our data. And therefore, it would be like, are we, in case of anything, we are not saying that, yes, something is going to be there, but in case of anything, what would happen to our data that has been collected for all those years? And our concern was, if we were to meet with the ED, fortunately she's here, if they don't have any backup system, because these are the people that they contracted that brought out that concern. And as per the discussions, it looked like there was no backup system. And we're like, if there is a problem with regard to financing, Parliament is there to support this kind of thing. If there is an issue of the institution that is supposed to host the backup, then it should be legislated upon. Because like you said that we have a Data and Privacy Protection Act.
Yes.
There should be an institution that is responsible for, you know, hosting all the data within the country. Remember, we are now talking of e-governance. And when we are talking of e-governance, therefore there should be a central institution that stores all our information in this country. Therefore, for us, but our interest is now in NERA, and fortunately, it handles classified information, because when we are talking of data that NERA collects, this is a security citizens register, and therefore it is a classified register for the people of Uganda, and therefore our information should be guarded effectively to ensure that we don't just lose it like that, or it is not picked and used by any person other than the responsible people or the responsible institution that is supposed to use it. Therefore, we are yet to hear and also confirm that yes, our data is secure.
As a committee, did you interest yourselves in the risks of data in illegal hands, and with examples that happened, for example, with the Cambridge Analytica during the US elections, and all the risks associated with data in a digital era?
Yeah, definitely, yes. Sarah, like as I said, the in-depth investigations are not yet done, because with the data, anything can happen to it. Anyone can use it to do other things. And remember that the same data was used during the 3 consecutive elections, 2016, 2021, and 20, those three elections that we have conducted. Therefore, when you say that anything can be, that data can be used to do anything, of course we are concerned as a committee. And that's why we are saying that we are yet to have an in-depth interaction with the responsible organizations to ensure that our data is safe, secure, and is protected.
Thank you very much, Honorable. I will first go to NERA, Madam Rosemary Kisembo. Can you please update citizens on what your institution does in terms of harvesting or ingesting data from citizens, availability, usability, integrity, and safety of their data, especially taking into consideration that citizens have a right of protection to their data?
The protection of data is governed by a couple of standards, one of which is ISO 27001, the Data Protection and Privacy Act 2019, and the policies and frameworks within the organization of NERA. Larger than that, there is an ecosystem within which data lives, grows, as you said, ingested, gets ingested, and is used, ultimately retired. The Data Protection and Privacy Act defines what is personal data. Name, date of birth, sex, biometric features, NIN, and a couple of other things. Personal data begins with an individual. So the first risk factor to data is the individual. I'll give a simple example. Nze Rosemary Kisembo, Jajja yebase gundi, ndi muzukulu wa gundi. You have already given a lot of the data that you wrote in Form 3 of NIRA's data collection point. In a simple Kwanjula, or in Western Uganda, we have a different way which we call it that chant, which you say, then you know, you kwevuga your grandfathers. So in essence, you have told us your place of origin, your current location, which is all resident with NIRA. That being said, government has put in place, one, the law that we are talking about. Without that law, even sharing your data with anyone would not be a crime. So that is the first level of protection. The legal and policy framework within which personal data is collected. Within the ROPA Act, there are guidelines on how a NIRA staff or a registration officer needs to collect data, needs to disclose data, and what are the punitive measures if they do not follow those guidelines. That is one. Two, after the legal framework, there are processes, there are procedures, and there are people. When we are collecting data at NIRA, you will notice that a one person interfaces with one person. All those are safeguards against disclosure of data. We could have called the crowd and said, Jangu, onomcha simutegede agambye chi, soma, musomereko. No. The interface happens between two individuals. So innate to the process are efforts taken to secure your data to you as an individual. But allow me to go to Section 20 of the Data Protection Act, which lays out security measures. Section 20 specifically says that, actually it's Section 20 to Section 23 that talks about security measures. The long and short is one, an organization must identify the internal and external risks that data is exposed to, while they say identify reasonably foreseeable internal and external risks to personal data. The risks of data in Uganda might not necessarily be the risks of data in Thailand. Secondly, do we identify the risks? Yes, we do, as the number one step in the security measures outlined by the Act. Number two, it says, must establish and maintain appropriate safeguards against the identified risks. Yes. Do we establish and maintain appropriate measures? Yes, to the extent that the financing is allowed. We may not have the latest and greatest, but within our budget, we take appropriate measures to safeguard the data. Number three, must regularly verify that the safeguards are effectively implemented. Luckily enough, I think it was April, May 2022, we were even audited by the Data Protection Office. So not only are we the ones saying that we are safe, but there are people who come regularly to check, is this data safe? And the last point is, in section 20, is ensure that the safeguards are continually updated in response to new risks or deficiencies. So the law also recognizes that the landscape, the cyber landscape, is changing rapidly, sometimes faster than a financial year in which they appropriate. Because the appropriate was in the financial year. Ransomware might come in the middle of the financial year. It completely.
But our budgeting is initiated by the user department.
Absolutely.
It's not initiated by Parliament.
That's true. Mom, hear me. I'm saying there's a changing landscape. When the process, the nature of the landscape is that you start the process in September to November, first budget call, second one will come in Feb, third one will come, and finally the budget is ready in June 15th. After that, money is released, and changes to it are only to the point of 10%. That is if all of it is released. So in essence, within the constraints that exist in this economy, your data is safe. At institutional level, from you as a user, before we began this discussion, I said one of the biggest sicknesses in life is cancer. And that is the body fighting against itself. The greatest risk to your data might be you. You go photocopy your ID, you leave it at the photocopier. That data in your control is exposed, distributed, disseminated without NIRA participating at all. On a telephone conversation, you read for your daughter your password and your NIN, or with your relative abroad. So, at institutional level, appropriate measures are in place to safeguard data within the confines of the resources that are available. In terms of total risk to data, to personal data, the question begs answers, not just from institutions, but from persons, communities, and individuals. Thank you.
Madam, before I get you off the hook, your experts interfaced with our members of Parliament.
Yes, ma'am.
And told them that we have no backup system. Is it true we are fetching water from a basket?
Well, I don't want to use allegories when we're asking direct questions. What do you mean by that?
Your experts said...
Which experts?
The German experts who designed our national security information systems interfaced with the Committee on Defense of Parliament. Are you fetching water from a basket?
In 2019, the contract of Mulbauer expired. It is 3 years down the road. That being said, NIRA data is backed up daily. I will not give any further information to that effect because all things in place, it is still a security system. But every single day, as the sun rises in the east and goes down in the west, NIRA data is backed up.
Okay, and maybe as you conclude your submission, there are plans to update and reissue new IDs which have like a smart card, electronic version. And in those plans, it seems you will be harvesting data afresh. Does that connect with what was told to the committee? Or will you be harvesting data afresh, or you will update on what you have?
There are 17.2 million unregistered Ugandans.
Those would be new applicants.
Absolutely.
How about the renewal and update to the electronic cards?
Yes, we will harvest data afresh in keeping with the ICAO standards that require, if it were possible, an update every 6 months.
Doesn't
It's
that
an
then
international
confirm
standard.
the rumors that you have no backup?
I don't deal with rumors. I deal with facts as the executive director of NERA. So the data is there. You have a right as a data subject to come and demand your data, and you can establish if it is there or not in keeping with Section 24 of the Data Protection and Privacy Act. It is our daily business, with consent of the individuals, to give data to different entities and different individuals, their personal data. So it's not, data and data protection is not sensation. Data is actually facts. And data protection and security does not thrive in sensation because the risks are real. The risks to data are real. And sensationalizing them does not protect the individual, but instead creates, I think what the experts should have told us is that there is a new risk this, and we feel that when we left, we haven't seen the new measure for it. But the measures for accessing data are clear. If you want to find out, you as Sarah can come tomorrow, instruct us, identify yourself, we will give you your data. It's just as simple as that. The reason why we harvest data afresh is because even the biometric features that identify a person degenerate over time. You are a beautiful woman, but I'm sure you looked more beautiful 20 years ago. So in a sense, we need to get the latest you. So that when they look at you, they are not, this thin person is not the other one. So we need to keep up with your biometric features. Okay, and we are getting a third feature, which is the iris. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Kisembo. Let me bring in Mike Avoneka as a human rights activist. There are international laws governing personal data and its protection, as well as best practices in the region and elsewhere. In your view, one, do you think that we have an effective legal system in this country to guarantee safety of personal data? And beyond Uganda, what are our neighbors' data protection mechanisms? What do they look like, and what are the best practices?
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for colleagues for the discussions. Data is very important. Just to start there, that there is data, and then there's personal data, and I know that most times people are more concerned with the personal data, age, color, and when Madame Edie talked about the iris, I'll be interested to find out how exactly that is going to roll out. But to start with is that Uganda has done quite well. I think Uganda was the first country, if I'm not mistaken, to have the first data and protection privacy law in East Africa. And I think number 27 in Africa. Now, you have the EU guidelines on data protection and privacy. You have the Malabo Convention, which is the AU Charter on privacy and protection mechanisms, to which many countries are part of. But there is a challenge in terms of how effectively we implement this. And one of the challenges, not a doubt, is if you don't have enough funds, you can't get the powerful backup that probably you need to. And Madame Edie has told us that actually, according to the standards, you need to back up almost after 6 months. Now, daily, according to the standards, at least you must have ensure that you have updated, actually update, not backup, updated every 6 months. Mm. But there is a challenge in that most of the countries in Africa, and also especially Sub-Saharan Africa and then Uganda, what we are trying to do is we are trying to do catch up. So you have problems The law is actually 2019. And the issues of cybersecurity have always been there, you know, because Africa is importing, has been importing the new life, the new digital life. So the most of Africa, we have just been importing. We are new users of this technology. So what that means is that we are playing catch up. Uganda inclusive, we are playing catch up. If up to now, people are still using probably 2003 or 2000 or 1993 what version or what have you. But that said, is that at least there is progress. I have noted progress in terms of how, especially Uganda, is trying to up the game. Now, the issues about data, I know there are security issues because data is a security issue. And one of the reasons I think the German firm was giving the committee is that one of the ways in which data can be lost is through terror attacks, through hacking, you know, fire and what have you. So how do you need to protect it? A country like Estonia in Europe, which borders Russia, they decided to say, you know what, we need to have a backup. And they have backups away from Estonia. And they're actually moving to things that they call digital embassies. That we have embassies and missions across wherever we are as Uganda. Can't we keep some of our data there? Estonia is doing it, and other countries. Now, it is difficult, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, to find out, for countries to tell you exactly how they are doing it. And I don't know whether it's because of the insecurities that are in Africa or because of the progressive democracy. You know, things about data and elections are intertwined. That we have had issues here of allegations of data breach and also data manipulation, where data is manipulated. The things about ghosts everywhere, ghost workers, ghost payroll, ghost voters. It's about data, personal data. So we are just trying to play catch up, and I think that's why most African countries will not be open to tell you exactly how they are dealing with this. Of course, there are issues to do with hacking and what have you, but they have to play a balance between that and the thing called open government, because now there is the process of how open is your government to provide data. If you go to a website, there are websites here, very many in this country, that you can't even find the data. They will tell you, when you click, they'll tell you website under construction. But the most important for me question is that when your data is processed, is it safe? And data is in many forms. People here actually, you know, go and apply for interviews. Their CVs are there. And then before you know it, people are saying, I'm seeing my CV being wrapped in a Rolex in one day. So then, but again, the law has a remedy that the person who does not protect that data or gives away data unlawfully can be charged under the law. But before we get there is that the people in charge, by the way, this is not about governments, about many institutions. When you receive people's data, you're supposed to protect it to the latter, because that is someone's life. You know their age, you know their mother, you know where they stay. So that is actually it's a security issue. But as I wind up on that, is that later I'll get back to what are the gaps in the law. One of the biggest problem is that I find a biggest problem is about the penalties, where you find the penalties for people who are breaching the data, especially the multi companies. You're paying peanut. Every now and then, everyone receives unsolicited information. You receive a message calling you and saying that there is a new spa. They are giving the best massages in town. And you're asking yourself, where did they get my telephone number from?
But the Computer Misuse Act is intended to cure those unsolicited messages.
Unfortunately, the Computer Misuse Act amendment, the only proviso, the exception they put, that except if the information is for commercial purposes. Can you imagine?
Yes.
So under the Computer Misuse Act, those people cannot be found guilty.
True.
But the question is, when you send me that SMS and say, vote for me, and actually I was even saying that if the MPs and do not come and support us on this Computer Misuse Act, they will be the first to be victims.
Yes. Yeah, we shall take
because
them to
they
court.
send us messages of, please vote for me. The man of the heart, the man of the hoe, please vote for him. That is unsolicited message, unsolicited information. But the point I'm coming back to, every day I receive messages. Of course, UCC says that you can opt out. You know, you can send something, they call them
Unsubscribe.
Yes, unsubscribe. But the thing is, where did they get my telephone number? And I know that a number of people have tried to investigate that. You know that, and I want to congratulate NIRA. One of the first cases they investigated was the Safe Border. This one is out there. There is a report, you know, where they had a third-party, you know, app called a Clever Tap or something. So you put in your information in an app set to, you know, but that app actually has various other apps that are giving information. For you, you think that your border guy only knows where you stay, but your information is taken elsewhere. The same case we had in Kenya about the allegations of Uhuru Kenyatta campaign, where a number of people were hired to come and put a lot of campaign materials on your timeline, because then they were surveilling your timeline. They know what you actually search every day, and that happens every day. So in a nutshell is that we have made some progress as Uganda, but Section 20 that the ED of NIRA has been reading, in practically, what does it mean? They talk about measures that are reasonable and mechanisms to ensure that data is safe. And of course, they will not tell us the prototype of how, you know, the security and the backup looks like. But we need to ask questions. And this is whether it is a bank or whatever, if someone's data is out there, who let it out? Or why did it move out? It means that probably your storage and security systems are not that good. Lastly, I know that NIRA has a security department that deals with the security of our data. So if, for example, the last place I went to was NIRA, either to update or get my national ID, and then tomorrow I receive maybe unsolicited information from various people using the same data. So how will someone know that actually it wasn't maybe from NIRA, it was from the bank? Because the truth is, it is not computers in NIRA, it's not computers in FIA, it's not computers in those banks. They are individuals, human beings. So maybe we need to find out, how do we guard against the human nature? I'll pay you money until you give me all the data about Sarah. The people in there, they are human beings. They can be compromised. So how do we balance between saying this is how far we can keep data secure, but these are human beings in FIA. They monitor your accounts every day because they're supposed to report. So then they will know Mike Aboneka has 20 million on an account. They'll call Evelyn, and Evelyn will kidnap my child. I'm just giving a hypothesis. But these things happen. So beyond just saying we have a security department, but beyond the human beings who can be compromised, are there, you know, safeguards in terms of the stages in which, just like you have Google Authenticator, the 3 steps, that it is only the ED, like, you know, a nuclear a button, that is only the ED of NIRA who can have the last, you know, say on this particular. I know it could be a lot of work, but the problem is, like the ED said, things about data are things about security. And we must try as much as possible to protect, because we're in a hurry to collect the data, process it, but the issue about security, we need to look at it beyond even, you know, the backing up and all those things, like I've said before. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Michael. And I'm coming next to our data expert, Kenneth Mhanji. But for the viewers out there, you can follow this debate on hashtag UBC Behind the Headlines. We are also streaming live on YouTube, UBC Television, and you can send us an SMS on 0709 602 592 and be part of this debate. Kenneth, Do you think we have an effective legal framework for data in this country?
That's a good question. But I think before I answer that, I wanted to first address a few things that my colleague Michael had mentioned.
Please go ahead.
I think one of the things that attracted me to the show, we're talking about behind the scenes, but I think the importance, one, of having, of giving the public, the proper facts or information. And I think the first thing that I wanted to speak about, which he had mentioned, was the issue of unsolicited commercial communication. I think if we put it out of context, it's going to scare Ugandans beyond what perhaps beyond the intention that we're actually speaking about it. One of the key tenets of our country, Uganda, is that government has said on several occasions that we live in a private sector-led economy. That private sector-led economy is not just something I think that is mentioned in passing or something that is a buzzword or catchword. It's actually the truth, in the sense that if you see the number of entities that employ Ugandans, you see that the private sector plays a very big role in that. And number two, whenever you're speaking about data protection, I think we have to be careful to be able to balance the interests. One, between the commercial aspects of leveraging data, and then of course the right to privacy, which is enshrined in our constitution and also in many other conventions that we are party to. Now, in regards to commercial communication, just to be able to inform the public, and so that we are speaking the same language, there is the law as it stands, and this is the Electronic Transactions Act, was enacted actually even before the Data Protection and Privacy Act, makes it mandatory, or actually, I shouldn't use the word mandatory, makes it okay for a commercial entity to be able to send unsolicited commercial communication, and as Councillor Michael rightly pointed out, with an option to unsubscribe or to opt out. Now, again, if you're looking at it from a human rights perspective, there are many things perhaps that you may be able to point out in regards to whether that is sustainable. But if ultimately, advertising and marketing are very important tenets for any business. And that's why, for a TV station like UBC, I think the biggest revenue that you'll be able to get is through advertising. And so sending these commercial communications, in its sense, does not have a problem. The challenge comes in where these entities, one, sell this data or give data to other people that should not have access to the data, and that is a problem in itself, and that's what I think we should be talking about.
But Kenneth, just a minute. If I have my data with MTN, for example, and MTN gives my details to a commercial advertiser, do they do it with my consent?
That is what I'm saying. What you're saying is proving my point, which is that ultimately the question should be what you have asked. That is not correct for an entity that has collected data from a data subject to be able to give it to another person without the consent of the data subject. That is what the law says. And I'm saying that you have to
question.
Yes, just hold on and I finish, Sarah.
Messages. How did you get my number?
No, just hold on and I finish. Ultimately, as well, you see the challenge with us Ugandans, and really generally with everyone in the world. There is a legal premise that we live by, that ignorance of the law is not a defense. And sometimes as well, we give away our rights without knowing that we're giving out our rights. Because by the time you sign up, let's say, to a particular newsletter or to products that these companies have, in many instances, you're actually giving consent for your data to be shared with other parties, especially for marketing purposes. Number two, if you read the fine print of many of these agreements, one, there is no bar for an entity that has collected your data to be able to share that data with a third party, specifically if you have already given consent in that line. And so I do agree with you, that is the problem, and that's why we must be alive to what the law talks about data protection. But unsolicited communication on its own, we must be able to balance the interests of civil society with what's happening in the country. And that also brings me now to the other issue. I think he spoke about Safe Border and CleverTap. Fortunately, I was involved actually with those particular investigations, and we discussed with NIRA at length, and I've spoken to Safe Border as well about it. I know for a fact, and this is something I think that you mentioned, that there is a report out there, that CleverTap was an entity that was handling analytics. And the data that they had, and this is something I think you mentioned, which I can still reiterate, is that whenever you're dealing with data protection, you have two aspects of data. You have personal data, which is data that identifies a human being. And then you have data, which is not personal data, which does not fall under the ambit of the Data Protection and Privacy Act. And that is data that is anonymized in the sense that it cannot identify me as an individual. And that is the data that they use for analytics purposes. And when the Data Protection Authority carried out their investigations, they actually ascertained that the data that was shared with Clevertap, which is an analytics company, which, by the way, if you checked, almost every entity that does online marketing uses that, including government agencies, they use that particular entity. But of course, I think the problem is marrying all those things together and singling out a particular company. And I felt really that the time when whoever made the complaint to the Data Protection Authority, I was happy that they'd made the complaint because, one, it showed that we have systems in place that are able to, one, investigate and make sure that the personal data of Ugandans is actually protected. That is something I think that came out overall. But beyond that as well, it's, in many instances, without clearly understanding how this data is used, how this data is processed, it then makes it difficult for entities like SafeBorder. Now, SafeBorder, ultimately, when you look at what came out of that report, they're actually exonerated. They were not selling any data. They were not doing anything illegal. Actually, they worked with the Data Protection Authority to be able now to firm up their policies and to ensure that they were even more compliant with the law. SafeBorder actually at the time had data protection policies even before the law came into place, and this is something that the DPA gave credit to them for that. And so I really just wanted to this is something that I'm glad that we have brought out, and I'm glad as well that we're having conversations around data protection and also around privacy. But I think we must be careful, as I've said, to be able to weigh the interests of the private sector and also the ones of civil society. And in ending actually with that, if you look at as well in terms of compliance, and many of these entities, if you witch hunt them, and I think that's what had happened, because I saw there were memes on Twitter and there were people that were posting talking about, okay, now SafeBorder is now going to do this and this. It's a company that has changed really our ride hailing or our systems whenever it comes to use of the safe use of borders in Uganda. And so things like those, I think, make it difficult for entities to be able to operate when you keep having, people taking things out of context. So that is one. And I know I have taken a long time answering the question, but I thought it was important for me just to give some clarity on that. But as to whether Uganda has adequate laws, I think that was a question that you had asked. I do agree with what Michael mentioned. Credit to Uganda, we're among the first countries, as he mentioned, in East Africa to come up with a Data Protection and Privacy Act. We are signatories as well to the African Union Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection. Council Michael mentioned that. And there are several other countries in Africa that have not yet signed to that particular convention. And so outside of that, the fact that we also have a Data Protection Authority with a directorate, and this directorate I've seen they're very active in terms of sensitizing the public about data protection. I've seen the director, Stella Alibatesa, appear on so many panels and on so many conferences to try and inform the public about the importance of data protection. And I think now we also, I don't know if the public knows, but it is mandatory for you to register and get a license with the Data Protection Authority if you collect data. And I think that's what the ED was talking about in terms of the audits that the DPA does to ensure compliance with that. So I feel, yes, we do have laws, and I think these laws are adequate. I think this is something Uganda has been blessed with. And, Honorable, this is something I'll give credit to Parliament in terms of the laws that they pass. I think the challenge is in having the public know about these laws, but also breaking down or dissecting these laws in a manner that allows all of us to be on the same page in terms of knowing what we need to do to comply with the law, especially around data protection and around knowing the distinctions with what is regulated under the law and what does not fall within the ambit of the law. I think that's what I would say.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kenneth. Evelyn, a lot has been said, but you are the practitioner with the software applications as well as being more on the user side of data. I would like to have your take on the safety of data, in your view, in the country, but also if you could share some insights on the premises of our data collection mechanisms in terms of responsibility, trust, procedures, and coordination.
Thank you very much. Yeah, very good conversation, and I really want to thank everyone for their input. I think the conversation we're having is a very important one, and for me, I'll come from a technical perspective because I think one of the roles that I did for the longest time in my career life was as a sysadmin. So as a systems administrator, I know the value of backing up data and doing all of those processes. So Madam Edie, I think for me, spoke about, you know, the question that you asked about the data and why we are all here. And that question about, is our data safe? And she said, it is safe. We do backup every day. I agree with that, and I think that for most institutions, they have some of those processes in place. But for me, from a user perspective, or from a person who's coming from a technical perspective, it's not just about doing the backups every day, but it's also about ensuring other processes in place. Today, if I went to an institution and I wanted to know about their data, can I actually go to the sysadmin or to the person who's responsible for that data and run a recovery of that backup? Does it actually work? So it goes beyond just backing up the data, but it also goes beyond to, do we have the systems in place? Do we have data backup strategies that allow us to even do tests? So if someone came and if we had experts to say, all right, show us you had a backup as of yesterday, can we recover that data and make sure it is usable? You see, so the conversation then shifts from only just backing up to actually looking at the procedures of, do we have mechanisms in place to actually test the backups? Do we recover our data, and is it actually there? Can we confidently say that? Yes.
So I see Honorable Nyachikongoro has somebody to go with in my investigation.
So that's a very important aspect. And number two, I think we also spoke about the, you know, where the data is. We built the infrastructure. I know that we do have the infrastructure in country, but I think you also spoke about it. Do we have different levels of these backup systems? Yes, we might have a location where we know the data is and it is safe, but do we have one single point so that if there's a failure or if there's anything that we're trying to fail, if there's a fire, God forbid, is all of our data in one location?
Or a terror attack.
Or a terror attack, or are we trying to do different, are we trying to have different places where this data can actually be can be backed up in different locations, either in country but also overseas. So I think those are some of the aspects that we need to think about. But also from a user perspective, when you say, what do you think about your data and is your data safe? I also agree that there's so many different levels on how to deal with data. You know, you have a personal responsibility as the person who is handling your data, but also if an organization, if a government entity, if a private company comes to me and is requesting for some data, they have that jurisdiction. And if you're like, Kenneth said that if you take my data, let's say you're a telecom company and you took my data, and the next day I find myself on an SMS line. I also sort of disagree with that, because I think one of the things that we have in Uganda, we have amazing laws, but we are not so good at implementing them. Because when you look at that data act that we have, if you took my data, you're supposed to tell me how many different things you're supposed to use my data for.
Yes.
So if you're collecting my data for the purposes of doing X, Y, Z, a data subject needs to know those jurisdictions in which their data is supposed to be used.
Yes.
If I go to a hospital and you say, can we take your mobile phone number? I always ask them, what are you going to use my mobile phone number for? I do not want any text messages from this entity. So, but these things need to be put in light, and people have to be sensitized about their rights. And because just because you have my phone number and I'm a patient at that company, at that hospital, does not give you a right to tell me 20,000 things that the hospital has done. That's not the reason why you took my number.
Yes, exactly.
So I think we also need to have a framework in which all of those are defined and people are sensitized and people know their rights and people know the laws. yeah, I think those are some of the things that I was thinking about as we were having this conversation.
Okay, but yes, please.
I think what she's saying is true because when you look at the data that, for instance, NIRA collects, because sometimes you say that you share that information on request to different institutions.
Yes.
And me as a user, actually, I don't know why
What
you're
you
sharing
do.
that information.
Yes, and
what
there
is
is
that
no
information
consent.
is going to do. So like we've said, it is the responsibility of NIRA, much as we were talking about the other security of it. But what is that data going to be used for, either in the financial institution or in an insurance institution or public service or that kind of thing, such that me as an individual now, I know that my data is not scattered here and there. But also, she raised a pertinent issue in terms of the security of our data, definitely. Like, we know that data is collected at different levels here in Uganda, at the, is it sub-county level, parish level, district level?
Parliament gate.
You know.
Where are you going? To see Honorable.
Put your need.
Yeah.
Now, for me, I'm talking about that data of
collection
NIRA, the
centers,
collection
the
center, the person who is
ingesting.
responsible.
That is a collection
You
center
know?
that can destroy you.
No, we are first talking of official data.
The official data, yes.
The risk is that my name, Rosemary Ksemo, in the Parliament book, if it was dispersed, doesn't change the fact whether it was collected by NIRA or by whoever. Personal data is personal data, and that is the premium we should place to it.
Okay, I agree, but let's first get Honorable's point.
Then that goes with what actually Sarah had earlier said, that if we have that data stored, can that data be used when we are going to, for fresh, not fresh, renewal of the new
of IDs. Why do you have to get that
because
again?
this question, you know, keeps on perturbing individuals. You know, you go to register again, fresh, your data is there, it has been captured, but they're asking you same questions. Why can't that data be used and you just add an addition of the iris or any other feature that you want to add, rather than now spending more on recruiting more people to go and ask the same questions. You know, the facial looks change, but yes, the camera will take, such that, you know, if we are looking for, now I'm now speaking as a representative of the people.
Yes.
Please.
You know, why do I have now to pay more tax to collect more data that you already have? You know, those are some of the things that people, and you have, you have backed it up. And two, my ED also talked about, you know, that those the Mulba people, their contract ended. But you know, in Africa, we have a saying that there's no smoke without fire. When someone talks about something, it means that that thing has been identified. But sometimes we want to work, I don't know what I can call it. If we have a detailed backup system, let's tell Ugandans that we have it, rather than now remaining in that kind of asking, do we have it? Don't we have it? I don't know.
No, but actually,
let Madam Evelyn first come in, because she had not finished.
Allow me, guys, to say something. You see, even the article that was broken by, written by Monitor, was a lie in itself. Where was the data breach? How many records were breached? Where are they? Who has them?
Madam Kisembo, please. We have the chairperson of the committee who interfaced with your former experts, as you called them. Let's forget about Monitor. Let's deal with facts in the room.
No, you quoted Monitor, Sarah.
Of course.
You did.
As a member
and
of the public,
I want to
Madam.
bring that to bear, to say that that was not factual. It was in breach of the Act, Section 24. Section 24 defines what a breach is and how it should be handled.
Okay.
But also,
let me first have Madam Evelyn as we go for a break, and we shall get back.
Yes, I just wanted to interject on that aspect of data. Madam Edie, I think there's different levels of data as well, but there's a point of also data integrity.
Yes.
And today, if we were to say, do all the records that we have in NERA, are they accurate and are they factual? Are those the exact real records that we have? You spoke about that people who are handling this data are actually people. From a technology perspective, I know that people can actually, you could have some records that are in there that are actually not factual. You could have 20 Evelyn Namaras, for instance, in the system.
That's true.
And what mechanisms do we have in place to ensure that what we say we have as the actual factual data is what we have, and what we're backing up is the real data we are backing up? Because when data is not, is compromised in that way, then we have another layer of a problem that could actually, cause more problems. I just wanted to put that there.
Okay. Thank you very much. On that note, Madam, it's time for a commercial break. But when we get back, we shall even dig deep into the hack of Airtel mobile systems using fake IDs. How did this happen, and how safe is your data? Don't touch that dial.
MTN presents Tugende Muchika Day at Kampala Serena Hotel on Saturday, 3rd December 2022. Standard tickets go for 100K, gold 300K, and 3 million for platinum. Or pay 90,000 shillings if you pay using MTN mobile money. Remember, this is only applicable to ordinary tickets. Featuring Eddie Away, Chance Nalubega, Sweet Kid, Kabiye Semboga, Akiki Romeo, Betty Pologoma, Ziggy D, Lady Mariam, Tina Tine, Abdumulasi, and featuring Aveka Band. All this at Kampala Serena Hotel. For reservations, call 0785-961-910. Dress code Retro Style. Sponsored by Elderly Network Foundation, Coca-Cola, Al Breweries Limited, Kadanke, and MTN.
It's our mission to secure your money.
Protecting your money is as important as earning it. It is for this reason that the Deposit Protection Fund of Uganda, DPF, was established by the government of Uganda to provide deposit protection to customers of regulated financial institutions. In the unlikely event that your commercial bank, credit institution, or microfinance deposit-taking institution fails, the DPF will pay you up to 10 million Uganda shillings. Keep your personal information such as national identification number, mobile phone, or an alternative bank account updated with your banker. Terms and conditions apply. For more information, contact DPF at Aha Towers, Plot 7 Lodell Road, Kampala. Call 0312-206-400 or visit our website at www.dpf.or.ug.
We are the DPF. We protect your money. Protection Fund of Uganda.
Paying for groceries the old way.
3, 4, yeah.
Allow me.
Paying for groceries with the My Airtel app. You have the power in your pocket. The power to conveniently pay for goods and services. Unlock that power with the My Airtel app. Visit the App Store or Google Play now.
That's my wife.
The Ministry of Health informs the public that there are confirmed cases of Ebola in Uganda. We, however, urge the public not to panic as the situation is being managed. The Ministry of Health further reminds the public to be on the lookout for any persons who may show signs and symptoms of Ebola. These include high body temperature, abdominal pains, diarrhea, vomiting, bleeding from the body openings such as the nose, eyes, and mouth. Please inform the nearest health worker immediately if you see anyone with these signs and symptoms. To prevent Ebola from spreading further, please take the following preventive measures: regular washing of hands with water and soap, avoid handshaking and hugging, avoiding any contact with any suspected Ebola patients. Any person who dies suddenly should not be buried but reported to the nearest health worker or LC1 immediately. For further information, please call the Ministry of Health toll-free number on 0800 100-066 or send a free SMS to your report on 8500. This message is from the Ministry of Health with support from UNICEF and World Health Organization.
Did you know that a cashless, secure, and convenient lifestyle is possible with Airtel Money Pay? Pay for your goods and services in the following simple steps. Dial *185*9#. Enter the merchant ID. Enter the amount. Enter payment reference, for example, school items. Please enter PIN to confirm. You will receive a confirmation message for a successful transaction. Airtel Money. Instant, secure, borderless.
Welcome back to Behind the Headlines,
Accountability.
and we are here
Keeping
debating
update.
the safety of data. We are back on air, and we are debating the safety of data in both national institutions, personal hands, the way we conduct ourselves with our personal data, how safe is our data. And before we broke off for a commercial break, I had Madame Kisembo wanted to respond to a few issues raised by Madame Namara and Rosemel, but also there was a concern on Airtel Money, what exactly happened, if she has information. I'm your host, Sarah Direte, stepping in for Charles Odongoto, who is not feeling well. Madame Kisembo, you have the floor.
There are two steps of verification that happen at NIRA. There is verify, whereby we receive an organization or an entity submits a NIN and details, and we say yes or no. So even if you miss one digit from that NIN, we don't correct you to say those are 13 digits. Or if you miss, if you write Kisembo and you miss the O, and you give the correct NIN, we don't say that, no, it's very close, but we don't do that. We simply say no. Yes or no. That is verify. Verify does not deal with consent, because in this sense we are not giving out any data. We are simply saying the data you have submitted is right or wrong. 1. 2. The next step is access and use. Access and use is whereby you submit biodata, and in response we give biodata. But that one only happens with consent. And the first level of consent is you go to the MTN and they ask you for your original national ID. Why? They are seeking to pick your fingerprint, which they will relay. Okay? So in essence, there is an element we don't deal with access, and nobody retrieves data from NIRA without the consent. And that you can verify with experts from anywhere in the world. Anywhere in the world. Not even Uganda. That being said, the story of Airtel data. I will not talk about the Airtel data because I don't know exactly what happened. I just saw in some tabloid that it was with fake IDs. I even tried to get to the journalist who had written to it. The question is, when you're accessing your mobile money, you use a number, a secret number. That number is not your ID.
It's a pin, it can pin.
So that confusing of information is what puts data at greater risk. So the facts are lost in confusion. There was a breach, yes. Where was the breach? Instead of focusing where the breach was, someone decided to cover that with fake IDs. Nobody logs onto their mobile money with their ID. Nobody. So that is somebody hiding the truth, and they need to come out and tell us the what? The truth. That being said, I want to invite a member of the public who wants to look at their personal data, who thinks it's not there, to come and identify yourself and ask for your data, and it shall be provided to you if you properly identify yourself. But it would be an injustice to this country if I did not tell you that your understanding of the risks to your data makes you protect it and even require me to protect it better. And that is not in sensation. What is the risk to your data? Is it loss? Is it fire? Is it hacking? Is it falling in wrong hands? Is it identity theft? What is the risk to your data? The risk to your data will determine the measures you put in place. One of the biggest risks to data is identity theft. And yet, we are the biggest players in enabling identity. The individual is the biggest player in enabling identity theft. So my plea is, data is a new paradigm. It's not tangible. It's not like a phone that I have touched it. Being a new paradigm, let us take time to understand what is data, what is its risks, what is the risk to Rosemary Kisembo's personal data. Is the biggest risk fire? Then NIRA needs to be surrounded by fire extinguishers. Is the biggest risk an attack? We're on the grounds and there are enough soldiers there to protect the data. Is the biggest risk loss? Then we need to ask NIRA about backup, recovery, on-site, off-site, inside the country, outside the country. Is the risk ransomware? Then there are different measures depending on the level and the type of the risk. That is what will determine the measures that must be taken to safeguard data.
But shouldn't those policies be in place already in terms of all of those aspects that you're talking about, safeguarding data, whether it's lost by theft going in or whether it's ransomware? I think we need to have a policy framework or some strategies that actually speak to all of these aspects.
And they do exist.
If this happens, this is how we are actually addressing it.
That's
because
true.
I think when some of those are out in the public and people can know and see them as policy documents and know that this is actually what we are working with, then I think that information makes people more comfortable knowing that we have a policy in place on data, and this is what the policy reads. This is what we are doing as a country on this specific item. So I think in most cases, people are blurry of some of these policies, that they actually exist, or they don't even know that we have some of these frameworks in place. And so I think from a national perspective, but also from an institutional perspective, getting this out and ensuring that the public actually knows we have them is one of the key things that we could take away.
And I think, how do we get them out? Who is our platform? Our platform does not want to report this. Our platform rather reports a data breach.
But you're on the platform.
No, I'm telling you.
This is a national broadcaster.
This is true, but I want to ask you how many people are watching this. The point being made is that the channels, we don't own the channels of communication. And that's why I'm saying the whole ecosystem needs to work together. That yes, it's okay to report a breach, it's in order. But there are also other aspects of protection that, they require broadcasters to give government some hours. Maybe they need to require broadcasters in specific areas and say, because data protection is becoming a big item, maybe because we have foundational data in so many places, give 1 page a year to that.
No,
actually, I want to bring in Kenneth. And Kenneth, as you come in, I don't know whether you followed events with the hacking of Airtel money, and if you can share some insights given your expertise.
Before that, I just wanted to, I think my role today really is just to try and sensitize the public as
No.
as,
The purpose
Edie
of
has
this
mentioned.
show is to sensitize the public.
Okay.
Yes.
One, I think something I really wanted to clarify, which was itching, especially from the last discussion in the last hour, is if you look at Section 3 of our Data Protection and Privacy Act, it gives you the principles of data protection.
That's true.
Which is that this is how every organization or person should be able to deal and handle with data. One of those is that data has to be quality and has to be up to date. And I think really this is something that we shouldn't castigate NERA for following the law, asking us to keep updating our information. I think the question is, perhaps how do we make that process cheaper, where you're not spending too much money, or in a way that is seamless, where you're also not inconveniencing the data subjects who have already given their data, especially where that data perhaps has just been collected within a particular period. So really just wanted to clarify that's among the principles of data protection, and I feel that it would be unfair to castigate an entity for following the law. Number two is the issue of data localization. One of the things that our Data Protection and Privacy Act was trying to remedy is the issue of sending data across borders. And if you look at, I think it's Section 19, it restricts an entity from processing data outside of Uganda unless that entity has ascertained that that country that's receiving the data has adequate data protection laws and is able to secure the data in the same manner that it actually does here. But looking at the spirit of the law, it was meant, one, to ensure that first and foremost, let us exhaust the mechanisms we have within our borders to ensure that we are protecting and investing in data storage. And I think that's why, again, we always have to look at the balance between public sector and private sector. We have a few data centers that have cropped up now, entities like Raxio, NITA itself has a data center for government specifically, and they've invested heavily in that. Now, I think any discussion around that, and I hope Edie, you're steadfast with that, is let's first look at utilizing those particular institutions. And if they cannot keep the data or back up the data in that manner, that's when we can think of sending it to another country. And I think if we then try to compare Uganda to Estonia or other entities, we run a risk of one, breaching the law, but then as well being too fast in following other countries, yet we can first be able to operate within the ecosystem that we have been speaking about.
Okay, just two things before we go to your next submission. I think on the update of data, we were asking whether applicants will be subjected to give information that is already available within NERA, or they are going to add only what is required for update.
I think there's an assumption you are making that your name remains your name. Some people, since they registered, they got married and got another name. Others divorced.
That is understood, but if you ask him about my grandparent again, I think I would feel cheated as a citizen. That you want to know my grandparent, you want to know my village, you want to know my parents.
The challenge we have is we don't know who is changing. We don't know who. We cannot look at you and say Sarah might change. We get applicants every day who change and say that is not my grandparent. I discovered my mother on her deathbed told me another person. So it is. It is you are the primary holder of that information, and when it changes and doesn't change, it's totally dependent on you. So we can only rely on you.
Anyway, but
what doesn't change is the biometrics. Those ones degenerate much slower than the biodata, but it is commonplace in NERA to see people changing, even their mother, which I thought was rather. And what we're trying to do there is to strengthen birth registration so that the information about the individual is captured early.
Yes, although I want to go to Kenneth. Although what you are submitting, madam, that would assume that a person who has changed data has an obligation to update. You shouldn't make it mandatory for everybody, including those who have not changed, to resubmit their information to NERA.
No, but actually, that's something again that I said I wanted to clarify. The
Yes.
law makes it mandatory
That is one.
for a data collector and controller
update.
to
Yes.
update that, to keep the data updated.
And-
not
and
to,
let-
hold on, not to update, but to keep the data updated.
Let-
Now, I think that then depends on the organization or institution, like NERA or any other institution, to provide mechanisms as to how they can comply with the law, to make sure the data they have is kept updated. Because you see, there's also a cause and effect to that. The effect is that if that institution does not do that, then the data subject has the right to report to the Data Protection Authority to make sure that the entity that has their data has data that is actually up to date. And so in terms of the actual mechanisms that the organization employs to be able to keep up to date, I think that's the one that perhaps ED will be able to advise us on. But the law as it stands is that every organization has a mandatory requirement to ensure that data is kept up to date.
And I think the triad of
That's
security is
reasonable. But that's definitely
confidentiality,
reasonable.
integrity, and availability. The integrity of your data is to keep changing with it as you change,
Yeah.
including your biometrics. As they age, as they diminish, we have to keep up to date with that. And especially in this with the cyber world.
Okay. I will have Kenneth conclude and go to Honorable.
So
If I
let me
get my-
say one last thing. We are trying to get into to deepen our financial sector, and in deepening the financial sector, the digital aspects of the ID will come into play,
Of course.
at a great deal. So who will want to transact with someone in how will someone in Hong Kong want to transact with someone in Uganda when the last information that was gathered was 10 years ago? So there is a whole ecosystem around this data that we must be cognizant to, even as we say this is good, this is not bad. For financial deepening and the digitalization of your identity, the more up to date your data is, the cheaper money coming in this nation will become, because they will be sure that the entity that has your foundational data is up to date.
Okay, let's give a chance to other panelists also to submit.
So I wanted to conclude, I think, on the Airtel issue. I feel I would want us to have a balanced discussion, looking at exactly where the gaps are. And I think Michael mentioned this very, very well, saying that the actual people who are causing their data to be, who are risking their data are us Ugandans. Because one, you'll agree that because a national ID is really the best document to verify the identity of someone, every institution, or most institutions, will ask for national ID before you're able to access services. Now, the questions are, do these entities that are asking for these national IDs, do they care about data protection? Do they have policies in place to ensure that the data that is collected is actually kept secure? And if you're looking at the fake IDs as well, I would think, and this is something I hope that the investigators can be able to come out, and mention, you find that these IDs actually us giving out this particular information. You notice even outside of that, and this is something Michael mentioned, you go to a Rolex stand, you go to any place, and they'll have your personal information, they'll have your CVs, and they'll have this. But even with national IDs, you go to a place and you give your ID, and if you're in a line and they call out your national ID, or they call out your name, and they give they call out those particulars for everyone to be able to hear and actually capture the details. So I feel really for every Ugandan who is listening, it is up to you first and foremost to keep your personal data secure. Keep your national ID secret, the same way you keep your bank account details, the same way you keep your bank card securely. I think if we have a discussion around where the balance falls whenever you have data breaches, you will find actually when we read the report that comes out, that most of that information perhaps was actually gotten from other sources rather than one particular entity. It is easier. It is now very easy to get a national ID, to duplicate a national ID, because, as I said, because of how we freely give out its information. But in certain other instances, you have no choice, because if you're trying to access a service and they're telling you must deposit your passport, you must deposit your national ID, especially if you're For example, if you're going to get into an office and they want to keep your ID and you give them the national ID, in most instances there are no mechanisms in place to ensure that those IDs are kept in a manner that does not, that perhaps no one will come and access them, or no one will come and compromise the security officer. Well, these are security officers who are signing in at these places that we're actually talking about don't know about data protection. They don't know that what they are holding is actually, a gold mine. And for some of them, I think that's where they actually compromise, and that's where the problem comes in. I think that's really what I wanted to clarify.
Okay.
Yeah.
Honorable?
Yeah, thank you so much. I just wanted to respond to what Edie said with regard to popularizing or sensitizing the public about issues relating to data protection and the security of our identity cards. I think the people of Uganda need to know that. And I thought that each sector had a spokesperson, and I believe you have one. It would be the responsibility of your spokesperson now to come out and sensitize the public. We have the broadcaster, we have the media center where they usually address people, so that we get to know about the importance of securing our identity cards, particularly not just throwing it here and there. I've seen it, like you said, of course she quoted the example of Parliament where you present it and then they write the details. All offices, actually, I've seen it in most offices. And the people who are handling it are not experts. They're just receptionists. They just receive, right? And in case anyone wants, you just pick the NIN number and you can use it for anything. So maybe this is an area that your spokesperson should come up and try to sensitize the public, particularly about data protection of the individuals, and also that. But also I wanted to seek clarification from you about the retention of the data. For instance, how do we have any policy on retention of that data that you collect, since now we are going to get into the new registration of new information? What about that old data? How do you dispose it of? How do you keep it? How safe is it? How do you now discard it to use the new information? Those are some of the things that the public needs to know, because they always ask now that, yes, you're going to ask for new information. What about the old information? How is it going to be disposed?
Honorable, building on that, and if I may ask as a legislator, although you are asking the chair, the ED of NIRA, we had an instance of premature retiring of the voters register, which court ruled that it was illegal for the Electoral Commission to have retired the national register and defranchised people from voting at the time Electoral Commission was adopting data from NIRA. From the legislative point of view, what measures do you think can be put in place in instances when national institutions are retiring data and requiring new data?
I think it goes back to...
because this is the same thing that the Electoral Commission did.
When we renew your data, do we retire the old one?
No, I'm asking about the Electoral Commission, Madam, if you may wait. Because I think the experience is different. Electoral Commission had people's data and retired it to acquire NIRA data for voter register. People, notable then was Honorable Norbert Mao, who missed out contesting for a parliamentary seat because he was declared a non-voter. So people went to court, and the court ruled that it was illegal for Electoral Commission to defranchise people and retiring personal data, citizens' data, was illegal. So in this instance, we have NIRA almost going to do the same thing.
No, that is not true, ma'am. That is not true. Okay, you tell us. That is not true. Let me be clear. We are not retiring the data. We are just farming up the data we have. Well, let me give you an example. Sometimes people apply more than once, and we still have their 24. Their thumbprints come. If you put them 3 times, they will come as such. What the system does is that it merges that record. It merges that record as one record and shows us and says this person is one and the same person. And sometimes you even see the aging. The strength of my right thumb when I first took it to NIRA is not the strength of the right thumb that I have now, of the grooves on my thumb. So the reason that data is kept, and I think we need to go to the why of data, because we've spent a long time in the how. The why of data is identification. And identification determines the who, the subject of the data. That who comes to play, not just in NIRA. NIRA's data is meant for use in the financial sector. Do you want us to, your financial sector, not to clearly know if you are the owner of that money? The who comes to play in the health sector. Do you want us not to be clear on who's the mother? So the point is that NIRA doesn't keep data for NIRA's sake. NIRA's data is in use across the ecosystem. And the more up to date that data is, the more relevant to use it is. The more up to date, you would be interested to know and amazed to know how many people change their names completely. And all we remain with.
But isn't that a legal process?
It is a legal process. There are statutory documents. But what I'm saying, the fact that the system keeps the life cycle over time, if this person was to play the fool somewhere, would at least as NIRA tell you that Rosemary Kisembo first came as Rosemary Kisembo, then came as Rosemary Nakatude, then came as Nakatude Emire. That life cycle would clearly show with the different times, with the deduplication, with the data that came with each application. And that you can put us to strict proof to prove. And we will stand and prove it.
Okay, let me bring in comments from the public as we continue the engagements. And if a comment is falling in your line of work, you note it down and respond. Hello, it's Dennis from Berenga. When we go abroad for some time, we find our mobile numbers have been given to other people. Is it fair? Because it's another data risk. We have a second question from Turiam Hachi Job. Thanks about this topic on data management processes. Many Ugandans are suffering due to data inconsistencies. We are moving from manual processes, but we have not catered for errors that are made before. Today, people have different DOBs, descriptionary in names. So this mismatch needs to be looked into more closely. Ugandans are missing on a lot of opportunities due to errors that were done unknowingly. This transaction had to be looked at closely as we think of the system integration with the minimal marginalization of those with data inconsistencies. Thank you so much. The third comment is from Dr. Patrick of BMC Breast Medical Clinic, Masanaf in Kampala. How can I change my national ID date of birth because it has gone wrong? It was captured wrongly. Otherwise, thanks for the great program. We have Kawaria John, an IT security professional. I would like to inquire from the panelists how APIs are secure because they are the gateways where most hackers happen. What regulations are there to protect the data? Hello, any knowledge about data saving? I don't have a name for that comment. And our last comment is good evening. I would like to bring to the attention of those concerned that in the Uganda government of a minority community of Balchus, Arabs, Indians, etc., whose great-grandparents chose to remain in Uganda during the expulsion of Asians and others in 1972. The said community face a lot of difficulties in getting national IDs as they are not recognized in the 1995 Constitution. The requirements from NIRA in terms of documentation to the said communities to prove their Ugandan origin citizenship are almost impossible to prove. Sometimes they are asked to go to the immigration department to naturalize, where again they fail to be recognized as Ugandans. Hence, a good number of them have remained without national IDs and have become stateless. Please, those concerned should have a legal framework or a law to cater for the said minority and other tribes. This is Graham Beg Muhammad from Arua. These are the comments that have come in from the public, and as you contribute, you respond to the comment if it falls in your line of duty. Kenneth, you want to go first?
Yeah, I think I can try and answer the one of the phone numbers.
Okay.
That's a very interesting question. I'm glad we're discussing some of these things, I think, on a show like this. I think something that came to mind, a phone number is actually what we call a personal identifier. A personal identifier is any number, anything that is able to identify me, the data subject, someone whose data is kept by a data controller or data collector. Now, these phone numbers have actually become even more important with the rise of financial technologies, with mobile money. You now have a phone number that phone number becomes your bank account. And that PIN, I think that's the one we're talking about, is how you're able to access your money and so on and so forth. And so there are two ways to answer that question, Dennis. Number one is when you sign those forms, when you get a SIM card, it actually has, those are the terms and conditions that I am talking about. And actually, I have, in perusing them, you'll find that they give you a caveat as to how long you can use a number for. And if you fail to use the phone number within a particular period of time, then that number is then, it can then be recirculated. But I think maybe that's something that we should revisit, and maybe as since we have a lawmaker here, it's something that we need to look at the practical side of it, being that if for some reason I've gone out of the country, but this is a number that, let's say, has my mobile money or has, it's a number that I have used
for NIRA registration?
Yes, exactly. And then someone else has it. That may cause a bigger anomaly than the fact that that number needs to get into circulation. But I feel maybe this is something policy can help to be able to address, and I hope maybe it's something that Parliament should be able to look into, that should we give a little bit more power to the phone numbers that we have to ensure that maybe a phone number becomes a number even for life. I think this is something that we should now be alive to, as I have mentioned. So Dennis, we don't have a clear answer to that other than what you sign for on those forms is what usually you allow the telecom to be able to give the number out. But I think that question now is a policy-related question where we should look at phone numbers in a deeper manner.
But I think when you say a phone number should be given for life, I think you have to look at it from a telco's perspective also. Why do they have to reassign that number? There are also security implications for a number being redundant in the market, and then suddenly they will appear. Those numbers can actually appear like 5 months later, and they're the ones being used to create some fraud. Because it's just like a bank account. If you're not using your account for a specific amount of time, some people you'll actually find that your bank account is blocked. Or if you're not doing a transaction for so long, you'll find that they will actually close, and then you have to go back and give reason for you to be put back. So I think it's a discussion that needs to go both ways, to sit down the telco to understand what are the security implications of why they have to swap those cards, and then also understand from a policy perspective or from the user's perspective their concerns. Because yes, when you go away for like 3 months, maybe they could put mechanisms where you can report before you go. Just like if I'm leaving and I'm using my credit card, I can tell my
Notify
bank
them, yeah.
Yeah, that hey, I'm notifying you, I'm going to country X. Let me transact in that country. So there are some of those mechanisms that we can put in place, but I think from a telco's perspective, there might be some liabilities of leaving such a number dormant for so long.
Actually, Evelyn, I like the example you gave of the bank account. You see, for the bank accounts, you have a deeper process, because if you don't use a bank account for a particular period of time, then it falls under what we call a dormant account.
Exactly. Yeah, but
and the
can
money
be reactivated.
Exactly.
And it's not
and even
given
then,
away.
yes, you'll find that the period, I think, before money can then maybe go to even the consolidated fund is after, I think, 7 years or something like that. I need to appraise myself with the actual provision of the law. So I feel, you know, if we leave it to the telcos to be the ones to determine just 1 year maybe that someone has not used their card, if you compare with the bank accounts that we're talking about, because that is how sensitive now, that's how sensitive these mobile numbers are. So I think if policy came up and provided a framework like how you have the dormant accounts, that's under the Financial Institutions Act and under the National Payment Systems Act if you're looking at mobile money and the payments.
Yeah.
So I think if we also looked at that in line with something like that, and actually speaking about the National Payment Systems Act, if now we also have that dormant account process under those numbers, I feel that there's now a contradiction with the law, and I think that is that's another anomaly that we have just pointed out now, with seeing that now you have compliance with the law if someone has that number for mobile money, and then on the other hand, you've also signed where you're saying that if you don't use your number for a year or for whatever period. So honestly, I feel this is something that the lawmakers should look into and guide us on that.
Yeah.
Because a phone number is now acting like
As
a bank account.
Yes.
It's a bank account.
Yeah.
Yes, but also it identifies a person, and when it's given to another person, it
becomes
is strange. It's
yes.
There would rather be a fee for non-usage instead of reallocation, but these are legal matters. Honorable, answer something.
I think it is something very interesting that can be picked up, because it is also a security concern, like you said. Because if I have a number and then all of a sudden it is given to another person, I've been misusing it. So those are some of the things. Perhaps maybe it could be given a time frame to report that and you renew, like we are renewing the identity cards. You know, after 5 years, renew your telephone number.
Yeah, exactly. I think
are you still the same person possessing it or not? Are you still interested in that line or not?
Yeah.
And what happens to Ugandans in diaspora? I think they are the most affected by these numbers.
So you communicate, that there are various ways of communication.
And it's online.
You feel, yes, you feel online. I'm the owner of this number, I'm interested in this number. You renew if it means, if we are used to paying 2 shillings, 10, what, you
I
pay.
like that. Yeah, you renew.
Yes,
I like
yes,
that.
Michael.
I think that largely, you know, from the discussion we are having is that, like I said before, that, you know, Africa, we are playing catch up. Yeah, there's a lot that we need to do, and we need to, of course, recognize where we have so far reached, and all these concerns that just show you that there could be very good things that we are doing as a country, but the people we are doing it for are not aware. That for me becomes a big problem, because even the issue of updating, and I know that NIRA is going to really invest heavily in this, because there are only 2 occasions that I have personally heard about the update process, where the minister stood up at the Uganda Media Center, and then yesterday at the Uganda Media Center Twitter account. I think the process says it will start in June next year, June or something next year. But that is for me, and I got it to know yesterday. But that you know, there's so many questions about NIRA. How can I do this? But I think that there is need to have more information, you know, reaching out there, and whether it's the minister of ICT, of internal affairs, let this be out there, because you see, is that once people don't have the right information, then you have all these problems. Yeah. You have the fraudsters. You know, people thrive in something that is not clear.
Absolutely.
So you have people doing all that, and I've gone through processes. There are many issues of investigations I've been part of, and you find that all this stuff is messed up. You have 6 people that have used the same number, and they are all picked up, and almost all the 6 are innocent. So that is a really big problem. So we need to have a way in which probably NIRA has to relay this information. He said, now we are doing a program on the mass renewal. How is it going to be? Up to now, people think they're going to pay 200,000 shillings. And yet that's not the case. You know?
That's for collection of errors.
Exactly. So that has to be sorted out because it may not be exhausted on a program like this. The other point I wanted to comment about is the law does not specify on how long the data can be retained. How long can you retain the data? Now, to me, again, that is also the other challenge, that the law as it is cannot tell you how long. They just talk about reasonable, how reasonable, keep it, but does not tell you how long you retain my data. Today, it will be NIRA. Yes, very good, we need to keep our data, but tomorrow, all these people keeping our data, the telecoms are not, for how long? So when they exit the market, how is our data safe? What is the transition? All this need to be looked at. We have seen many telecoms leave.
Yes.
We've seen many companies leave. In terms of, apart from doing the legal things which Kenneth does, the liquidation processes and winding up, but in terms of the data they have,
How do they
if they have not found a new buyer,
even just
how do they
sell
deal
it.
with that data? Because the law doesn't actually provide for how long will you retain that data. And it could actually categorize on various categories. And that's where the issue of electoral commission came in. Because then, and I know that NIRA, and there's now a talk of what we call synchronization or having data in one place. Now, if we are going to be updating information with NIRA, and then electoral commission wants to use the same data, and everyone else is going to use the same data, it must mean that the quality and all these issues we are talking about has to be very essential. Because at one hand, NIRA is saying I can keep my data for as long as I can keep. On the other hand, the entity is saying we can only keep your data for 2 years. And so that has to be sorted because then you'll have all these problems. Now they're talking about DNA, all those details, and then the iris, you know, that is coming in. So we need to find a way of ensuring that, one, telling the people that it is good for you to have this data in place because of the digital world we are going into. But number two, that this is how safe your data should be. And also, I think it's high time, I haven't seen a lot of, I know that people complain by sending SMSs, but there are some, we need to test out these issues. If you think your data has been breached, the law is clear. Take on someone. And that way, people will learn because we have to continue testing the law. It's new, but it has to be tested. So lastly, I think Kenneth mentioned balancing between the business. There's something called business and human rights.
Yes.
That you don't want to do business in total disregard of human rights, but at the same time, you don't want to say that after all you exist is because of money. So we need to strike the balance. And I know that this government has a national action plan on business and human rights. It's doing very well there. So we need to balance between saying that you have a right to privacy, but I have a right to make business. You know, I need to make money, so I will use your data whenever I want because I need to make money. So those are some of the bigger conversations that need to go, that ultimately my right to privacy should be guaranteed, that beyond your commercial interests. Yes. And to me, that is it. And like the ED said, why do people need your data? It can harm me if someone accesses my data. It's almost like my life. So beyond for me, that should be the rider, that beyond the interests, that we should protect people's privacy at the cost of all the other things. And then we should all, as Ugandans, as all of us, find a way of protecting our data. Like I have said, that parents in this country are the worst violators of their children's privacy. They are posting them everywhere. They are posting, I have now gone to school. So we know where your children go to school. We know which cafe you like to go to. We know what coffee you like. We know, and that is all still data. It is up there. It's social media and everywhere, the status we put. So we need to be also, as Ugandans, like they say, trade deco, and make sure that even as the people that are supposed to protect that data are supposed to do their job, we also have to do our job.
Actually,
I think we are going towards the conclusion.
Yeah, I just want to supplement what you said.
No, but you will supplement in your concluding remarks.
Okay.
So I want to start with Evelyn, going that side. Okay. Your concluding remarks on the topic.
Yeah, I think my concluding remarks, I wanted to bring it back to the center of where we started, you know, talking about the data and looking at everything that we've discussed about, thinking about ecosystems, bringing together different players. I think it's important for us to have those partnerships, like we say, private and public partnerships. For me, the issue of backups is very, very key. So understanding, do we have the right backups? Do we have the right systems? And like Kenneth said, when we're talking about you know, different backups, it's not, when we say remote backups, it can be remote, but still in the same country. Remote doesn't just mean, you know, it has to be outside there. So I think for me, we need to strengthen those partnerships between both the government and private sector in terms of building these systems to make us stronger. But also my final plea is we need to sensitize the people. I feel like we have the best policies when it comes to Uganda, and we have all of these things in the under pocket. You're like, oh, but there's a policy for that, but there's this act. But not many people actually understand, you know, how these acts, how these policies affect them and how they should act. So I think we have a very big mandate of educating the masses about some of these issues. So I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much. Mike, do you want to add anything?
No, just to say that it's always good to have these conversations and that the conversation should continue. And I want to request that, you know, for government, there is always something we call, you know, a failure to have people come together. You know, because we have, in this battle of data and what have you, we also know it's a security issue. But let's not work in isolation. You know, this ministry is working on this, the other ministry is working on this, everyone is looking for a grant on this. But I think it's time where now we speak collectively. There are various beautiful views out there, and then we say, okay, as the entire sector, let us, you know, sort these issues, and then Parliament will be able to give it a report, and then let us have some issues that are for policy review, and make this workable, because we cannot run away from the digital age. We just have to make sure that it is safe and it works for all of us.
Thank you very much, Madam Kisembo. If you need to respond to any of the comments, and then you conclude.
Okay, there were two questions, one on data inconsistency and another one on change of date of birth. I think those go further and to strengthen the need to update this data.
Integrity.
And then to carry out a mass enrollment. Because from the public, there were 5 questions, but 40% of the questions are asking how can they change. So let us carry out one exercise and establish the facts in a better way. We do acknowledge that we have a big role to play in communicating and educating the public. We continue to build the synergies. We have 67 interfaces. I think maybe having the highest in the country, integrating with many people to ensure consistency. I'm sure today if you went for your passport, if you have different names at passport and different names at NIRA, that will be sorted out. So I want to thank the people who planned this and the panel for raising the pertinent issues, and to cry out to the public that we have a role to protect your data, but you could be the greatest risk to your data. Keep it safe. Thank you.
If you may allow me, although asking after you've concluded, there was a question on citizenship, the minorities, and inability to register for national IDs. Do you have any comment about that?
That is a comment that I'll leave to the parliamentarians, because the person highlighted that we are keeping the law within the constitutions, and they requested for a constitutional review on making the process simpler for them. Thank you.
Kenneth?
Yeah, I think one, I just wanted to, I really enjoyed Michael's submission, specifically around the importance of having every data subject know that, you know, they have a right to their data, and also if an entity, let's say, is going to exit the market, it must do so in a manner that allows data to be handled well. And really, the point I just wanted to supplement, I represented, our firm represented AfriCell when it was exiting, and I remember Uganda Communications Commission as part of its requirements before they could allow them to be able to exit, and also Bank of Uganda, there was a requirement for them to be able to sort themselves out with the Data Protection Authority. And I think with that, I also really commend now that the way that these institutions are working together, specifically the Data Protection Authority, I think it was now delinked from NITA, so it's a separate entity, a separate directorate that handles data protection. And so for any entity that is exiting, it is mandatory for you to be able to submit to them, especially policies around data destruction. And so although the law does not provide for that, the Data Protection Authority will ask you for policies that confirm that you're going to destroy data in this manner, and you're going to retain data in this manner. And actually, since I mentioned earlier that every data collector, it's mandatory for you to go and register with the Data Protection Authority, and part of the process they ask you for policies, and some of those policies are policies around data protection, policies around data destruction, policies around data retention as well. So I think that's something that the Data Protection Authority has been proactive in doing, in ensuring that entities comply in that manner. But outside of that, really, I think one of the things that I'll also remind the public, and for anyone who has a business, one of the requirements under the law is for you to have a data protection officer. That officer can be any person that is within your structures. You don't have to hire someone outside of that. But the importance of that is to ensure that your organization is alive to data protection and alive to the policies and procedures that you need to be able to comply with the law. And really, I'll end with what my colleagues have mentioned. Data protection is not just for the institution that is keeping your data. Even you, as a data subject, I think the biggest responsibility falls on you. And maybe since I'm sitting next to Madam Edie, it would be so good not to line up when we are going to update our data. It would be so nice if we can embrace technology.
I know.
That is really just a plea for us Ugandans. We are suffering.
Suffering with lining up everywhere.
Yeah, but will it be digital or physical?
No, you know, there will be a part of it that is digital. But even when we went to the floor of parliament and said, let's go digital, the point was that there are 58% of Ugandans who don't have the ready access to the internet. So this is a mutu wa wansi discussion versus omuntu wa wagulu.
I think it should be a hybrid.
You can do both.
That is it. There will be a hybrid. There will be a hybrid for those ones who will. There will be a pre-registration for those who will go online and have capacity to do so. But there will also be a presence at parish level to allow the 76% of the masses who live in the rural areas.
I think that will help us.
Okay, how about diaspora? Do you have an arrangement?
Yes, we do. For the just as there will be, because there will be an online presence, the people in diaspora will be able to use the same online presence.
Thank God.
Honorable, you have about 5 minutes.
That's very good. Thank you so much.
No, 3 minutes. If you can use 3 minutes to
one, I want to appreciate
conclude
the discussions.
And, yes.
2, I want to say that you know, in Uganda we like working in silos. And you might find that you know, like the Edie was saying, that they know the risk factors and the issues of budgeting. Maybe they cannot manage acquiring a better backup system, yet there are others that have a better one. And these are people that can back up each other, especially the security organs, if they can work together, so that we don't duplicate services. For me, I believe that can help us as a country, but also to support NIRA. If they don't have adequate backup system, we should look into that one, because we cannot afford to mitigate against the risks that she has talked about, yet we need that information. But also this enrollment of the masses, like she has talked about, and members kept on asking about changing names, age. There is a big issue of changing age in Uganda, and that's why when we were discussing with Edgar, that is Director of Analytical Laboratory, they were like, you know, they work together, and we wanted something that can detect the age. And you know,
I might
with
come
this
back as an
mass
18-year-old.
renewal, people want to change their ages, and particularly public servants who want to remain
Yeah.
on job.
Working.
They don't want
Yeah.
to retire.
Yeah.
I don't know how NIRA is going to work out that on that to ensure that they are registering the same ages that they had registered, because
Integrity
now
is
people are
very,
alert,
very
they want to
essential.
change the ages with the new identity cards.
But doesn't public service use the date people use to apply for jobs?
I'm telling you, they come up with different excuses, you know.
And that
The-
is fraud.
Yeah.
I know, and those are some of the things that they should really work on. But also to ask Ugandans that let us respect the institution that is in place, and whenever there is an issue, let's raise it up with them so that they can handle it, rather than, you know, complaining in the public arena, so that we beef up our institution to work properly.
Thank you very much. That marks the end of tonight's episode of UBC Behind the Headlines. I have been with an experienced panel with the Honorable Rosemary Nyachikongoro, Kenneth Mhanji, Madame Rosemary Kisembo, Mike Aboneka, and Madame Evelyn Namara. And to you, our viewers, we can't exist without you. And our dear production team behind the scenes, I wish to thank you all very much. And Charles will be with us next Wednesday to host the first December's episode of UBC Behind the Headlines. It's good night from us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
MTN presents Tugende Muchika Day at Kampala Serena Hotel on Saturday, 3rd December 2022. Standard tickets